How's it going, YouTube? This is Russell Stelzer from SinceDayOne. Today I got to play in the Masters Cup hosted by Zulu Board Game and Cafe in Bothell, Washington. And I got first place with Iron Brawley. This is the same leader that I played at this year's Nats. Unfortunately, lost my winning in time. Basically had the game locked down, but just couldn't get it done fast enough. Which is unfortunate, but decided to run it back with this leader. I'm a control player at heart, so naturally I just gravitated towards this leader. For those of you that don't know what this guy does, on his front side, he's a basic draw one on attack, and then if you have a Z unison in play, you can awaken, draw one, untap an energy, and go down to 4 life. His backside is where things get really spicy. He basically on both players' turn, the first time one of your energy is tapped, you get to draw a card. And then if it's your turn and all your energy is tapped out, then you get 10k power for until the end of your opponent's turn. And then you get to free play a Fierce Foe card that has the same energy cost or less than your total energy at that time. So very unique leader. When you read it, if you've been playing Masters for a long time, it just inherently sounds very broken. The one caveat is that you do have to tap out for his ability, so it does leave you very susceptible to like offense from your opponent. But we tried to build this list to mitigate that downside of being tapped out on your opponent's turn. So let's go ahead and get into the deck profile. All right, so to start things off, 4 basic draw 2 super combos. I just draw 2 super combos are broken. If you can run them, just go ahead and run them. Getting on into the Fierce Foe stuff, I have 4 Turles, and I also have 2 Gohan. He's not Fierce Foe, but he's basically our 1-drop. We want to see one of these on our first turn, just so we don't have to go -1 in hand in order to get our Z energy and get our Z unison out. But the Turles is also really nice because he has a lot of battle shenanigans that you can do with him, especially in like late game situations when your opponent's trying to push for game. If you ever like play Fierce Foe defensively, you can discard this guy and tap down something, and a lot of times opponents just don't see that coming. And so it doesn't come up a lot, but he does have that one nice little option of being like a pseudo hand trap. And then for our 3 drops, we have 2 Janemba, 4 Garlic, and 4 Hirudegarn. These are your 2 main ones. Hirudegarn is probably the most generic one because there's not a single matchup where he's not good in. He just gets to draw a card, pop something, and if you pay another energy, you can draw another card and give him barrier, dual attack, and he has double strike. So he puts a lot of pressure on. He can get people down below 4 very early, or he could pressure unisons. Whereas these 2 can be a little bit more niche, more so the Janemba. He's definitely in here to clear barrier threats that we have hard times dealing with, and sometimes he can also just put on a lot of pressure being a big dual attacker. Garlic against anything that can't deal with it, so against like non-red or yellow matchups, Garlic's pretty insane. But against yellow and red, he does tend to be kind of useless at most points in the game. But again, he also has like a really interesting second effect where he can tap down anything, which in late game situations does come up sometimes. Being able to tap down something that your opponent's not expecting does come up from time to time. But yeah, he's probably my favorite one. But red is just so popular in the meta right now that sometimes you don't always get to play the boy out. Going on to the 4 drops, we have 1 Bio Brawly, 1 Brawly Omen, and 2 Metacooler. So I'm a big fan of all these. Sometimes people like playing more ratios of one or the other and cutting them. Metacooler tends to be one of the more popular ones. He is very he does do a lot. He's essentially a 30k dual attacker. If you pop one of the 3 tokens, you get to play with him. He also gets to draw a card. Like in the mirror match, a lot of times you can just like kill their Tapion Unison by playing this guy, and your tokens just get are 3 swings in at their Unison that they're not stopping. And a lot of times in that matchup, being able to clear Unison is really important because you always know that your opponent is probably holding on to a release from evil. So being able to get rid of their Unison, and that clears the way for your big guys to swing freely. But also, I'm just also a big fan of these guys. Brawly Omen can just draw you a bunch of cards. And if they don't answer it, he just keeps drawing you cards. And then Bio Brawly is actually really good against like he's not good against red, but in a lot of other matchups, kind of like Garlic, if you're not playing against like red, then he's just like hard to deal with. So he's a very sticky 30k blocker. Also against black decks like Panzino, they have a lot of barrier guys they can put out there. Sometimes they play like the 6-drop Vegito, which can be a nuisance. But if you can kind of force them to block with their guys or put them in rest mode, then you can stick Bio Brawly out there and you can keep their board locked down, which a lot of times like all you need is like one good turn of locking down their board for you to like bridge the gap into the later game. So he does come up in handy for those situations. But all in all, the 4-drops are probably like the weaker ones of them. Obviously, you want to max out more on the 3-drops because you want to see those early, and also the 3-drops because of their secondary abilities kind of act as pseudo 4-drops anyways. So the 4-drops are probably the least important ones. Not to say they aren't strong; they definitely are very strong in their certain situations. But if you're going to cut down on copies of any of these, the 4-drops are definitely where you can play around with the ratios. And then I played one of the 8-drop Brawly. This actually came in clutch today. I played against Garlic Jr. and Garlic Jr. once they get going sets up a very scary board, especially against Brawly. We're not a very fast deck, so they get a lot of time to set up multiple blockers that have indestructible. And so this guy being able to come down and rest their blockers definitely helps out a lot, lets you put some pressure on. So like when you get into late game, you can easier push for game, whereas like if you don't have this guy, it's a lot harder in like the mid game to be able to push through all their blockers. So he was actually very good. And then to round out the fierce foes, I play for the Bojack, and I'm also gonna put this Android 17 here because he's kind of like a 5th copy of the Bojack. He's another free negate. Again, because you do tap out quite a bit in this deck, it is nice to have that free defense. Like you always want the free negates in hand. People know that you run Bojack, but a lot of times the Android 17 does catch him off guard. There are a couple leaders in this meta that can swing more than once, so sometimes that secondary effect of Android 17 comes in handy. Moving on, we have 2 SS2 Gohan Unison. He's not a bad turn 3 play, but typically he's something I like to drop later on in the game. Being able to play him and then -3 is just a very strong play. So you can't do that turn 3. So I do kind of like to hold him until later on in the game when you can slap him down -3, get 3 attacks out of it. It also makes your leader a 30k, which is just like very hard for your opponents to deal with a lot of the times. So I am a very big fan of this card. We also have 4 of the SS4 Vegeta counterplay. Again, more free defense is always a plus in this deck. You pretty much always have a Unison up, so like this guy is always very live. Especially, when you're playing against like blue or green, they're going to side in. They both have a Trunks that deals with indestructible, but both those cards have to swing to proc their effect. So being able to just like hit their guy, put it in rest mode. If green or blue can't deal with your Garlic Jr., then most of the time like they're just not pushing past your defense. Like Garlic Jr. just puts in too much work against both those colors, and they don't have great outs to it. So a lot of times blue and green tend to be very good matchups for this deck. And going on to my extra cards, I run 2 Release from Evil, Time Magic, and a Frieza Army Reinforcement. Again, more defense that can be played for free. Um, you just can't go wrong with these. These are all very good. We know what they do by now, and they just there's a lot of cards that swing multiple times. That is very scary for this deck. So these cards help deal with that. And then one of 5-drop Frieza. As you know, I've been playing 5-drop Frieza for years now. It's one of my favorite yellow cards, so anytime I get a chance to slap this guy in a deck, I do it, and it's been very good to me. Um, Again, this guy's just kind of a house against blue and green. Even against more aggressive decks, like you wouldn't think that Frieza is very good against like black or red, but I typically tend to keep him in as a one of in those matchups just because there's been a lot of times over the years that I've played this card where uh, you're in a situation where your opponent passes back to you and they have a huge board and he just comes down and clear it. You know, they may clear him the very next turn, but a lot of times when you're a control deck, just being able to gain back tempo on the board is very huge. And so even though like against red they can just like neg this guy to 0 and he dies, sometimes just being able to clear the board is good enough. Which yellow doesn't have like a ton of like board wipes. So he's definitely in there for those situations. But then again, against colors that can't really deal with this guy, he just puts in so much work. And then getting on to kind of like the best package in this deck, we have 4 Bulma, 2 Shenron Wishgranter, and I'm going to go ahead and put these cards next to them. We got 3 the 4-drop Sin Counterplay, Nimbus, and 2 Oceanus. So these cards are not foreign to Brawly. You'll see most lists will run Bulma, some lists run Shenron, some lists don't run Shenron, but in some aspect you do see some sort of untap. And they're very good in this deck because they do allow you to, one, just like draw more cards, but also being able to being able to tap out and still proc like the secondary effects of like your 3 drops, nets you an extra card, and also their effects are just very good. So, you know, it's never a bad idea to say yes to more draw power. You know, deck thinning is deck winning. But the biggest issue with Brawly is it's a very predictable deck most of the time. Most of the time, you expect your opponent to tap out, play down some big dudes, and then pass. And, you know, a lot of decks in the meta, like Nova and Red Vegeta, can really take advantage of that because they just have so many different swings that can hit 25, 30, that just make it really hard to defend. Your hand size just gets whittled down very low. You just don't want to be comboing a bunch of cards against those decks. And that's kind of where these come into play. So a lot of times on my turn 3, I'll go Bulma, tap out, play my Fierce Foe, and then I'll leave the 2 untapped going into my opponent's turn. And depending on what I'm playing against, if I'm playing against a more aggressive deck where I know it's a turn where they typically can put a lot of pressure on me, I'll keep the energy up for these guys. If I have like Oceanus in hand, I'll just leave the 2 energy up. If I have the Nimbus, I'll probably tap 1 for either my Garlic or Hirudegarn to get that extra draw, and then leave the 1 energy up going into my opponent's turn. Because it is important that when you do tap for one of these, you want to be completely tapped out, just so that you can still use like your Bojack Negate, because if you leave energy untapped on your opponent's turn, you can't use your Bojack Negate. So that is important to think about. But typically, Sin Shenron is like the best one you want to play on turn 3. So you'll go Bulma, play your Fierce Foe, pass your opponent. They play something, you play Sin. So you get to draw 1 for Sin's ability, and then you draw again for your leader ability. So you draw 2 off of him. And Sin is just a very generically good card. We all know that. Like he's pretty insane in the mirror match, just being able to like pressure like again Unisons. Unison control is very important in the mirror match. He's just another thing that your opponent has to deal with that they don't expect in the Brawly matchup. Again, like your leader is basically a base 25. So being able to use your energy on your opponent's turn is just kind of absurdly broken. And that's also kind of where the Wish Granter comes into. again, like he just draws a bunch of cards, untaps energy, and then lets me play on my opponent's turn still. So that's kind of like how like my goal with this deck is I wanted to still be able to play as much as possible on my opponent's turn. Because against good players, if you just like tap out and pass, like 25k in modern day Dragon Ball just isn't strong enough. But being able to have like 1 to 2 energy up going into your opponent's turn as a 25k leader is definitely good enough. So yeah, this is kind of like the bread and butter of the deck, and what catches a lot of people off guard because they're not expecting to see Sin Shenrons and Oceanus played in Brawly. And yeah, I think it just adds a lot of value to the deck. If you haven't tried this out, definitely I think you should give it a shot. See if you like it, because this has definitely been the biggest change to the deck that I made that has been very good to me. And then to round things off, I got the Cooler SCR. If I'm going to be completely honest, like I love this card, but I don't love it in this deck per se. Sometimes like tapping 5 and putting your opponent down to 5 cards in hand just isn't enough. Again, like sometimes like playing Shenron Wish Granter is just like better. At Nats, I was playing Gogeta SCR because again, Gogeta SCR kind of fits into the game plan of my deck a little bit more, like being able to be aggressive but also lead the defense up for my defensive package so that I can still play on my opponent's turn. I am a bigger fan of that. This card is probably best in the mirror match. If you have Cooler SCR and your opponent doesn't have Cooler SCR in the mirror match, a lot of times you just win because both decks are really good at just stalling each other out. And so putting your opponent down to like 5 cards in hand, if they can't answer that, is just like too much tempo loss for them, and then you're able to just run them over at that point. Unfortunately, Gogeta is probably the worst one in the mirror match because they side into the Mecha Frieza 4-drop. They can just absolutely steamroll you by putting out your Gogeta on board. Gohan Piccolo is probably the safest pick, just because there's never really a situation where Gohan Piccolo is just a bad card, where there's definitely a lot of games where Golden Cooler just like feels very ineffective and sometimes dead. Like today, I think there's a couple of games today where I honestly just bottom decked on my draw 2 super combos because I just like it just wasn't gonna do anything for me in those situations. But you know, when it does impact the game, it is a very broken effect. So yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with this guy. I was just playing it today because I wanted to try him out in the deck as opposed to the Gogeta that I've normally been running, and he was fine. Going on into the Z deck, I played 2 of the Tapion Z Unison. This is your turn 2 play pretty much every single game. And this guy just does a lot for the deck too. Like being able to still play Bulma on 4 energy and just like, you know, tapping down or keeping Unisons and battle cards tapped in the early game so that your opponent isn't pressuring you and you can bridge into those like 5 energy turns that are very explosive. Yeah, this card just does so much for the deck. And also like that +0 gain to restand it, especially if you is like pretty strong. Like there's a lot of times where this guy gets to swing multiple times in a turn, and sometimes it just puts in a lot of work, especially when you play out like 4-drop Meta Cooler and you have the tokens. Like if your opponent is just like base 15 and has no way to like buff up their leader, like sometimes you just overwhelm them with attacks that they're not expecting. So yeah, I am a very big fan of this card. And then we have the one Kaioken Unison. You know, when need be, he is a board wipe from the Z deck, which is really all you need him for. But he can also be like a big double striker to help close out games if need be. And his +0 effect says when your opponent swings with a battle card, you can choose one of their battle cards and negate its skills for a turn. Also very strong. It does come up. It actually came up in the finals today against Xenopan, where they had the opportunity to go into a 1-drop Goku with their last energy to swing double strike for game. But when you had this guy out there, he can take away double strike. So very strong. And then I have the one Oolong. He never really came up, but he's in there. You know, I do play Shenron Wishgranter, so I can untap energy and still proc my leader ability. And then you have a lot of guys with a lot of attack power in the deck, so sometimes you can't just play him out there for one to get that last life. But yeah, he could honestly be anything else you want to. He's definitely a flex spot in the Z Extra. And then I do play 3 of the Z Extra specifically for this deck, and to go along with it, I play the Gogeta, the Caulifla, and the Cell. So all these cards just have a bunch of different keyword skills that you can tuck under the Z Extra, and it prevents your opponent from attacking or restanding with any battle cards that share those keywords. So it's definitely a very strong card. One thing I'm not running is the 8-drop. The 8-drop is pretty good when you can set this card up and play your Meta Cooler and have all those tokens out, and then tap them down for free and play your 8-drop. I just found the 8-drop not to come up too much, and I don't know. I wanted more things that since I play, 4 Bulma, 2 Shenron Wishgranters, and then like a heavier defensive package on my opponent's turn, I had to cut certain things, and that was just like one of the cards that was least used in the deck. Not to say it's bad, but I didn't think it was needed, and I honestly just didn't miss having it in the deck. But this card, regardless, is still very strong even without the 8-drop Brawly. And then going on into the side deck, I have a 3rd copy of the Gohan, again, against like green decks that make you want to discard cards. He's just, free value. And then the 3rd release from Evil and the 2nd Nimbus. Again, just against like aggressive, like this is really good in the mirror match against aggressive matchups. I put this guy in there. And then I put in 2 Frosts, just in case I run into any mill decks. Green Zamasu sometimes just randomly sneaks up there, so it is nice to have some tech just in case you run into it. 3 Vegeta. Any deck that puts out big beaters early like Nova, it is nice to be able to buy some turns against them. He didn't come in too often today, but in the matchups where he's good, he's very good. 1 Clan of Terror Mecha Frieza, mainly for the mirror match, just because you don't know what secret rare they're running. And it is nice to be able to just look in their hand. Honestly, most secret rares are fine to take out of their hand. But just being able to have that knowledge and like gain control of the secret rare battle is pretty huge in the mirror match. 2 Belmod. Pretty much really only bring him in against matchups where I know they're not going to pressure me very hard on 4. Because a lot of times, again, like I like to save my Tapion Unison, so I'll go into like Bulma on like turn 4, or maybe I'll play out a Rocket. Just play more defensively, because turn 4 is kind of like a weird turn where it's definitely not one of your big power turns. Like turn 3 and turn 5 tend to be your better turns, and a lot of times your turn 3 play ends up being your turn 4 play anyways. So against like very aggressive matchups, he's not like the safest thing to do. Play out, because he doesn't protect you going into their turn. But against matchups that can't really abuse you on turn 4, he is a very strong effect. So I do like him. 2nd Frieza, again, just coming in for matchups that have a hard time dealing with this guy. You play out one of these guys against blue or green, again, even like black in some scenarios. It's just very hard for them to play defense. And if you put out the 2nd one, it's just, if they activate a counter attack, they pretty much just lose the game on the spot. Against Scarlet Jr. today, I got to put out 2 of these, which basically just said, if you want to activate a counter attack, I'm just going to tap down all your blockers. So this was another way I was able to deal with like a board of like of 5 blockers. So yeah, he has a lot of applications. The 2nd Brawly, again, kind of the same as Belmod, like decks that are, more mid-range or control oriented that don't have like a huge turn 4 play. I'll bring him in because he does a lot. Like he taps down energy, so he essentially puts your opponent behind a turn. He draws a bunch of cards on his own too. So against matches where you can safely play him, like he is just like an absolute house. And then my last 2 cards for the deck are Poutine and Jiren. So I put Jiren here again because the way I built my deck, like I like to pass with energy open. So if you go deep against blue decks, like it is nice to have the Jiren. They're probably not expecting it out of a Brawly player. And then Poutine's like really good against. Poutine's pretty good in the mirror match, just because a lot of their stuff comes down by skills, so you get to tap him. And the mirror doesn't play a lot of cards in one turn, so a lot of times tapping one card is just it's very effective on their turn. Like you're stopping a lot of aggression by just tapping one card. It's also really good against like Red Vegeta. Like if you play like on your turn 4 and onward, if you get to free play out like Brawly Omen and then play Poutine, it's just a lot of tap effects that they have to worry about since all their stuff comes into play with abilities. They play something and you just trigger and tap down a lot of their board. And the way you can sequence them too is like sometimes you can play one and then play the other one after, so you can get both proccing them on the same turn. It's just a very big tempo swing against Red Vegeta. So yeah, I'm a very big fan of this card in the sideboard. But that is it for the deck profile. Please leave a like and a comment down below. If you are a fan of the deck, if you have any suggestions for the deck, please let us know. And yeah, until next time.